Okay, so I am going to talk to you about the experience of the body, which is something that I'm interested in. And what I'm going to do is try and give you a sense of why this is puzzling or interesting. So it's just a few ideas that, I find interesting. Okay, so you might think that awareness of your own body is a little bit like your awareness of any other kind of object. So if you think about just a simple case, looking at something, what happens where you see an object, say a table. The table's got certain properties, so in this case it's got 4 legs and it's brown, say. And you might think that for your awareness of it, for your vision of it to be going well, your vision should present the object as it is. So you should see it as having 4 legs and being brown. Now, I was sort of starting to think, well, is awareness of the body like that? Obviously, it involves different senses, so it's not like seeing in, the sense of just looking at something. But nevertheless, is it like that, where you have an object which has certain properties, 2 arms, 2 legs, and so on, and your awareness of it is going well if your awareness presents it exactly as it is? Now, before thinking about that question, I wanted to present to you another puzzling and interesting case, which is our experience of time. So if you think about time, the units of time, the seconds, the minutes, the hours, and so on, they're all uniform. They just tick by. Each second is the same length as each other second. So time itself is constant. But in fact, it's a sort of well-known truism that our experience of time isn't like that. If we're really bored, time just drags. It takes ages when you're in the doctor's waiting room. Whereas if you're having a nice time, then time kind of speeds up. And something else that's interesting about that is that unless your experience of time is particularly distorted, so the kind of experience of time that people report having on drugs, such as LSD, where time hugely stretches, unless you're having an experience like that, we don't think that your experience of time is illusory. It's just part of how you live in time for your experience of time to have that kind of variation. Now, what's interesting is that your experience of your body is, in that sense, similar to time. I mean, think just a little bit about the kind of object that your body is. It's not like other objects where, for example, if it's a chair, you can walk around it, you can look underneath it, you can look on top of it, you can get a perspective on it from all sides. If you think about your body, one of the things that you never see, for example, is the back of your head. You might occasionally see it if you're in one of those changing rooms and they've got mirrors from all angles, but just walking about, you never see the back of your head. You often don't see your face. Unless you look in a mirror, you're not constantly sort of aware of your face. You don't look at the soles of your feet very often. You don't look at the small of your back. There's all kinds of bits of your body that you don't normally see. So actually, your body is kind of a peculiar sort of object. And what we find when we look in more detail at the experience of the body is that you get those kind of sort of stretchings and compressings, if you will, that are similar to your experience of time. So just to give you 3 examples, one of the things that happens when you experience the space around your body is that there's a sense in which you experience that as part of yourself. So one kind of example is if you've injured your arm, and as people start to move into your bodily space, they don't actually have to touch your arm for your arm to start hurting. So the space around your body is experienced as almost part of the body, part of the self. Another example of this is the way that tools can be incorporated, in a sense, into the body. So think about walking through a door. When you walk through a door, you don't have to calculate whether or not you can get through it. You don't think to yourself, right, I know that I am 50 centimetres wide, that door looks about 70 centimetres wide, great, I can walk through it. There's no sort of explicit calculation like that. You just look and see and then know whether you can walk through the door. And if you consider using a tool habitually, something like, say, a bicycle, when you use a bicycle often, you start experiencing the bicycle in similar sort of ways. So you can just look and see whether or not you're going to be able to get through 2 bollards. You don't have to stop and think, my bicycle's this wide, the bollards are this wide, yes, I can get through. You just see that you can get through it. And another example that people sometimes point to illustrate this is the example of a blind person using a stick, where they use a stick to navigate around the world. And what happens is that the sensations that they have in their hands, which are the sensations of holding the stick, become automatically translated into information about the ground. So the stick becomes an extension of the body. And then a final example, there are lots and lots, but the final example that I'll give you to think about is the example whereby lots and lots of us experience our bodies as either larger or smaller than their actual dimensions. So your classic examples are people with anorexia who are reported as experiencing their bodies as larger than they are. And then there's another condition which is quite similar to anorexia in some ways, but which is more experienced by men, where they experience their bodies as smaller than they are. And there's obviously the body ideal of wanting to be really muscly that's at work there. So there are lots of ways in which our experience of our bodies doesn't just track the actual features of our bodies. And just like when we experience time stretching or compressing when we're bored or when we're excited, we don't think that's an illusion. We don't think that these experiences of the body are illusory either. They're just kind of part of what it is to live inside a body. Now, the way that people try to explain this, and I'll just be very brief on this, but just to give you some idea of some of the explanations in this area, people talk about something called the body schema, which is related to something that you might already have heard of, the body image. But roughly speaking, a schema is a framework for organizing something. So it's a bit like a template which tells you where the pieces of something go. And the body schema is a framework for organizing your experience. And people think of it as involving 2 components. There's a relatively settled sense of what kind of thing you are, what kind of body you have, what kind of person you are, those kind of things. And then there's your ongoing experience as you move through the world, as I'm sort of moving like this at the moment. You have experience of your limbs changing their configuration in space. And both of those things are part of what's known as the body schema. And then people suggest that that sense of who you are, I said it's relatively settled, but it can change sort of as you go through your life. And in that sense of who you are, there's all sorts of things collected together. There are your experiences of your body, but there are also things like emotional attitudes that you might take up towards your body. There are your habits, because as you habitually do something, you get a kind of sediment in your bodily schema of the kind of thing you are, a thing that has certain kind of capacities for action. There are cultural ideas about the body, what kind of bodies are good bodies, what kind of bodies are attractive bodies, what kind of bodies are disgusting bodies, all those kind of ideas. There's also things like systems of oppression can affect your sense of your body. And so on. That's not an exhaustive list. So people suggest that when we're talking about experience of the body, a distinction that's useful to make, and this is the last thing that I'll leave you with, is that we should distinguish between what's sometimes called the objective body, which is the body as we might normally describe it, having legs, arms, head, a certain size, being a certain color, and so on. And then there's the lived body, the body as you experience it, which, as I've kind of suggested, has all these other kind of interesting features which form part of your bodily awareness as you go through your life.